Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with the Dream Life, Peace Corps, and inspiring author Donna Barr. She could only dream of living on a South Pacific island as a Nebraska farm girl. At 57, after raising 3 sons and a successful career, she joined the Peace Corps and was assigned to the South Pacific Islands of Samoa. Her memoir of that life-changing adventure, My View from the House by the Sea, A Life Transformed by Samoa and the Peace Corps, is her first book. From the rainforest on the Big Island of Hawaiʻi, surrounded by orchids and other tropical flowers, we get into this incredible journey. Enjoy.
It's great to meet you. Where exactly are you located on the planet?
I'm on the Big Island of Hawaiʻi.
Okay, all right. That's what I assumed. I didn't want to. I didn't know sometimes people travel, but I'm in the cold sunshine of Kansas City here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and I grew up in Nebraska, really close to Omaha, so I know what that's like.
Yeah, the engineer for my show, Neon Jazz, he is actually from Lincoln, Nebraska, and talks about it quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not too far.
Well, what a dreamy life that's happened later on in life. I'm looking forward to getting into your adventures and your books. So again, thank you for taking a minute out. And I want to begin our journey by asking you how much of living through this COVID pandemic has influenced and rippled through the life that you lead right now?
It seems like a long time ago already, doesn't it? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Hawaii was very unique in that regard, in that we were the only state that was able to be completely locked down. So for 8 months, we had no one coming to the islands, and then for another 9 months after that, it was either a negative pre-test or quarantine once you arrived. And so for basically a year and a half, we had very limited numbers of visitors, which is unusual for us, being a state that depends largely on tourism. And we love sharing Hawaii with others and depend on the economy. But I have to say it was pretty darn nice having just us here for all that time. With you could go to the biggest beach on the island, and there were 2 other families on the beach, or my friend John and I could go for a hike in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and see no one for 2 hours, which of course just doesn't happen most of the time. So it was pretty unique in that regard. And then speaking of my friend John, spoiler alert for people who haven't read my book that I will mention in a moment. I met John just at the end of writing my book, and so that would have been the fall of 2019. And so with COVID coming quickly on the heels of our first meeting, we were kind of our own little COVID bubble during the time that we were getting to know one another. So not only were we, navigating relationships in our 70s, which is a whole other interesting thing that I should write about, but again, we were just us. So I think I'll go back and write about that someday as well, about, navigating relationships during COVID. But that kind of then leads into my book, which I mentioned, which the title is My View from the House by the Sea, A Life Transformed by Samoa and the Peace Corps, because I was working on my memoir about that experience at the time that I met John, who is also a writer. So it was a great time to do all of that, and at the same time, my book was nearly finished, so it was published in December of 2021. So most of COVID time, and the months following, I was actively working on my book, which I'm very excited about.
And your story is fascinating. So let's cover a little bit of leading up to you writing this memoir. Take me back to your beginnings in life and how these seeds of adventure and wanting to live by the sea and getting to Hawaii and writing your book, what was kind of the precursor to all this happening in your life?
Well, growing up on a farm in Nebraska, I didn't even see the ocean until I was 20 years old. So I didn't have a chance to actually experience any of that other than vicariously. I've always loved to read. Probably one of the reasons that I like to write is because I love to read. So I think reading stories when I was young about people having adventures off in the far seas probably was part of it. I also grew up in a family that didn't travel a lot because we didn't have a lot of money, but we did try to take vacations as often as we could, and my parents always talked about how they wanted to do more traveling someday, and my grandparents had done a little bit of traveling. So I think travel was just something that was always talked about in my family as well.
So talk to me a little bit about your career. What did you do for the bulk of your career?
Well, like most people, when I started college, I didn't end up doing the same thing that I thought I would do when I ended college. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I started off trying to, well, not trying, but actually pursuing a degree in English to become an English teacher. And then in my junior year, I decided that I didn't want to become an English teacher, and so then you have a degree in English with no teaching certificate, and that's somewhat problematic, doesn't give you a lot of career opportunities. So I thought, well, should I go to law school or should I go to graduate school? And I chose to go to graduate school and got an MA in public administration. And then shortly after I got my degree, I had an opportunity to work in a law firm as a paralegal. And so, ironically, even though I didn't choose law school for the next 15 years, I actually worked in law firms. So that was a little quirk of fate. But I worked as a real estate paralegal for those years and really enjoyed it. Started teaching at the community college, taught in a paralegal program at the community college during those years, and enjoyed a lot of it, but it's a very stressful existence working at a law firm. So I thought, well, what can I do with management experience, real estate experience, legal experience that's not in a law firm? And that actually led me to my first foray into real estate portfolio management, which was being director of real estate for the Archdiocese of Denver. I'm not Catholic, didn't grow up Catholic, and they didn't care because all they need is qualified people. So for 8 years, I managed all the real estate for the Archdiocese of Denver, which is the northern 24 counties of Colorado, worked with the lawyers that I used to work with in the law firm and hired them to work for the Archdiocese and do our outside legal work. And so it was a really interesting time. Pope John Paul came to Denver while I was there. I got to meet him. But then I had an opportunity to do the same thing for the state of Colorado. So I ended my career in doing real estate asset management for the state of Colorado, buying, selling, and leasing all the real estate for the state property. But earlier in my life, I had lived in Hawaii. I had an uncle and various cousins in Hawaii, and I knew I wanted to get back to Hawaii someday. So the minute I could, I retired from my state job and headed back to Hawaii, where I am now. And that led to a few other directions, and ultimately Peace Corps, yeah.
That's wonderful. So what was the book when you were young, growing up, that you read that was one of your favorites, or one that really opened you up in either wanting to write or read more? Actually more than one, because I think I read the entire series of Little House on the Prairie. I loved those books when I was growing up. I grew up in a little house on the prairie, not quite as rough and tumble as one Laura Ingalls Wilder grew up in. But I did grow up on a farm in the middle of Nebraska, and so a lot of that story resonated with me. And my grandparents, who had come as pioneers into that country as well. So that's one of the books that I always remember. And, of course, it was always interesting for me and my family because my maiden name was Wild, so I was born Donna Wild. And so we used to always have fun with anybody whose name was Wilder, like Laura Ingalls Wilder, because, we were wild, but they were wilder. Too
many jokes about wild. I didn't like it when I was a kid. Now I kind of like it. But,
yeah.
you know, as a kid, you get kind of tired of all the jokes.
Yeah, no, for sure. So who's been kind of an inspiration for this lease on life that you've had, you know, later on to get in the Peace Corps and really follow your dream and write? And even before that, who's been kind of that hero or inspiration for you?
My grandmother, on my mom's side, was a woman who wasn't afraid to take risks even for her era. And I think maybe she instilled something in me from childhood that has always been there. You may even know, living in the Midwest where you do, have you heard of an area in Iowa called the Amana Colonies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, my grandmother was born in 1898, and she grew up in the Amana Colonies, and which was a communal society, a very strict religious communal society. If you left, you became an outsider. You weren't shunned nearly as bad as some religions, but nonetheless, you were not part of the group anymore. And so at 17, my grandmother took a job as a nanny in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and learned English because she had only spoken German up until that time, taught herself English, eventually went to Minneapolis and to business college in Minneapolis. Married my grandfather, who was in the seminary there, and she became a pastor's wife. And they were on their way to Africa as missionaries until my grandfather's health prevented them from doing that. So, you know, that was a pretty auspicious beginning for her life, and maybe that influenced me in some way. She's always been my heroine for being there, being persistent, having perseverance. She had a lot of faith and optimism. You
know, the interesting thing about your story is, you know, it's never too late to follow your dreams. Did you ever imagine that you would get to a point in your life where you would join the Peace Corps and write a book and do all of this? Was this something that was kind of percolating, or is it something that still surprises you? Well,
from the time that I was a young person and knew about the Peace Corps, I was always fascinated by it. I was always fascinated by travel and adventure and opportunity, and I'd kind of always had it in the back of my mind when I didn't do it when I was young that maybe I could do it someday. Be an opportunity to have an adventure, travel someplace, the government would pay for it, and, you know, make a difference along the way. So I went into it with kind of a, well, let's see what happens attitude and wanting to make a difference, but I certainly had no idea that it would change me the way it did and it would turn into the fascinating adventure that it did. I know that you can't expect to go into something like that without expecting some change and without expecting adventures along the way, but it created a lifelong connection for me that 15, 16 years later, I'm still enjoying. I now have, I went to Peace Corps in Samoa, and which a lot of people don't know exactly where that is. They know we have a territory called American Samoa, someplace down in the South Pacific, and 70 nautical miles away is the country of Samoa, which used to be called Western Samoa. And I wanted to go to the South Pacific. I requested the South Pacific because I loved my life in Hawaii. But once I got there and lived with a Samoan family and became part of that family and went through all of my Peace Corps experience, of course, as well, I've now been back 6 or 7 times in the 15 years since I've been here in Hawaii. And I have lifelong connections with my family there. They've come to visit me here. I consider the youngest girl in the Samoan family that I lived with to be my unofficially adopted niece, and we're very close. Thank goodness we now have things like Facebook Messenger, and we can talk free, video calls all the time, all the way from the middle of the South Pacific. So it changed me a lot.
So I'm curious, every day you wake up, you're living this reality of living in the place that you want to be in. You've written this book. You're living the life that you want. What is it that motivates you, that gets you up every day to continue to live this life that you have?
That's a really good question. Well, I just turned 75, so I could say momentum. I remember once hearing a saying that says, we live on momentum. When you stop, you're finished. So, there is that, if you just keep going and just find something new to do every day, you will keep going because momentum is a thing. But I think mainly it's because I've just been always such a curious person. Maybe that came from being such an avid reader when I was young, or growing up in a family of people who were curious people. But I can't go a day without learning something new, I don't think. I love online reading, and I'm usually reading about 3 books, and I belong to 2 book clubs. And, I think that's a big part of it, is just looking forward to the next day because it's going to be something new and exciting. It may not always be positive exciting, but it will be new and exciting.
So of all of these things that you've done and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Well, besides raising my 3 boys, who I'm very proud of, certainly writing my book. I'm proud of the effort that went into that and the ability to share it. Peace Corps actually has 3 goals. One is to do a project of some sort. The second is to share America with the people in the country that you're stationed in. And then the third is to bring that country back home to America and share about other countries in the world with Americans. And so, my book I consider to be part of that ongoing goal to share about Peace Corps with the world and share the world with Peace Corps. So I'm very proud of having been able to do that journey through my book. And then also, hopefully I made a difference somewhere along the way.
So I'm curious, you're living in a beautiful place. I've never been to Hawaii, but I just can't even imagine how beautiful it would be. Where else would you like to go? Having a sense of adventure and loving beautiful places, is there another place that you would love to go and see?
Oh, yes. So many. I've been to Queensland, Australia, but there's so much more of Australia I would love to see. Going to Queensland and saying you've been to Australia is like, going to San Francisco and saying I was in America. It's just, there's so much more. So I'd love to go back to Australia again. If I get back to Europe, I've only been there once. I've been to Germany once. But if I get back to Europe, I want to go to Italy. I've always wanted to go to Italy. It seems like there are so many wonders of the world there. So I would love to do that. And I'd love to go to Japan. So, the list is probably a very long one. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I've been to Italy a few times myself, and you're right, it's magical. There's so many wonderful things. I mean, all of those places that you mentioned is just ripe with all kinds of wonderful things. So I'm curious, at the end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone that's read your book, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm an intelligent woman who's curious about the world, ready to take on new challenges. I hope people think of me as being a kind and caring person. Had something on my gravestone, I think it would rather be that I was a kind and caring person than anything else I've done, probably. But, yeah, that's it.
So what has been one of the best responses or fan letters or reviews that you've gotten of your book?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I'm really lucky that I've gotten a lot of good feedback. long ago. It was actually probably just before my last trip to Samoa, which was in August. I got an email one day, kind of out of the blue, and it was from one of the kids in the village who used to take computer classes when I was there teaching. And I actually have just pulled it up here on my phone, and I'm certainly not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'll read you a couple of lines here. Reading your book was an emotional journey. Upon reaching page 346, where you wondered if the children from the homework center would remember the lady who taught them basic computer skills, I knew I had to reach out. The children you once taught have grown up. Some are now teachers, ITs, work in banks, police department, public servants who have moved abroad, starting families. Those of us still here still reminisce about those days, and we want you to know that you've played a role in the achievements of all of us from the Homework Center. Well, I got that message in August, just a couple months ago, and yeah, that's what it's all about.
Wow, that's wonderful. So if anyone out there wants to pick up the book, they want to reach out to you, learn more about your life, any of the good business, where can they go?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, ebook and paperback. I've just started a new YouTube channel, which I'm having great fun with. It's part of the third goal of Peace Corps, sharing Samoa with the world. I'm sharing short videos and other tidbits about Samoa on my YouTube website. One other little interesting thing, talking about looking for the book, my name is Donna Marie Barr, and that's what I've written the book under. But there's another Donna Barr out there who's famous, and she's a cartoonist. And so it was an interesting little dilemma to try to figure out, well, how do I use my name, Donna Barr, and yet not get confused with the other famous Donna Barr? So I've always put my Marie Barr in the middle there. So Donna Marie Barr, if anybody wants to look it up on YouTube or look up the book on Amazon.
Wonderful, Donna. This has been so nice. I genuinely have that thirst for adventure and getting out there and living it to its fullest. And this is a wonderful story. So I really admire you and what you've done. So thank you for taking a minute out today to talk about it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.